Hello there. Last week, we talked about the three steps from the finish line, and we talked about how you could propel yourself to your goal or meeting your resolution in a quick manner. Woo, tongue tied today. But guess what? Today, we are strictly talking stress. We're going back to the basics and we're going to talk about stressing less. We'll get to it in just a moment. Hi there, everybody. I'm glad you've joined me today on Stress Talk. I am Marcelin Bailey, and I just want to remind you of a few things before we get started because we're going to give you 5 steps that you can take to stress less. But first, I want to remind you to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook at ML Bailey Consultants. Look for ML Bailey Consultants and follow me, please. Also, I'd like for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel at ML Bailey Consultants as well. Please subscribe. I want you to subscribe. Please, please, please. I know I'm being a little silly today. The other thing I want to remind you of is the Reu shop on forrealsocialworkers.com. The Reu shop is a shop for women to renew, refresh, rejuvenate themselves as they give their all to their family and to the world around them. So there's some good things for you on the Reu shop. Last but not least, you can always find information about our events and what we're doing on mlbaileyconsultants.com. That is our main website, and you'll find announcements and other good things on that site. For those of you who missed signing up for the Living Mindfully Everyday experience, um, just don't be faint of heart because next month you will have another opportunity to do so. The registration for this month's experience has closed. So you will not be able to register for it because it occurs. Registration was for tomorrow's event. However, next month you'll have an opportunity, and I hope you will take advantage of that when registration opens. And I'll definitely let you know when that happens. So let's get into our talk for today. We're talking about 5 steps that you can take to stress less. Now, as many of you know, when I talk about stress and how to handle stress, I go in deep because I often talk about the hidden causes of stress. And so we're going to delve into that today. Now, I may not finish because there's a lot of information that I'd like to share with you. So if I don't finish, then I'll just bump the remaining information to next week and make it a part 1 and part 2. But we'll see how far we go today. First, let me pull up my slides. As you know, I always have slides that I usually have slides. There we go. Okay. So we are talking about 5 steps to stress less. And when people talk about stress, they often talk about stress from the standpoint I should say, when people talk about stress relief, they often talk about stress relief from the standpoint of what you can do to eliminate the effects of the stressors outside of yourself. The things that are around you that, or the occurrences that you are exposed to that contribute to your stress levels. When I talk about stress, I talk about how you can inwardly manage the stress response that you experience, which will in turn help you to manage the stressors that are around you. So let's get into our 5 steps to stress less today, okay? So, one of the things that the first step to stressing less is to understand what stress really is. We often talk about stress as if it is a condition that if we just take medicine, or if we um, do some type of activity, we can get rid of it, right? We can totally get rid of stress. Unfortunately, and I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it is a misunderstanding. It's a miscue because stress is not a condition. It's not like having strep throat or a cold or high blood pressure or a broken toe. It is a little different. And to understand it gives us the information that we need in order to manage it for ourselves. So, let me give you a little information about what stress really is. First of all, stress is a physical response. And it's a physical response, which means that when we are stressed or when we say we are stressed, we are actually feeling it in our physical bodies. We are actually experiencing a physical change that has caused us to feel stressed. Our muscles tighten, our breathing gets shallow, our heart beats harder and faster, our blood pressure goes up, the digestive system slows down. There are a number of changes that occur in our bodies when the stress response is initiated. And the stress response is initiated by unspecified stimuli. And what that means is anything can trigger the stress response. Anything can take us from feeling calm, relaxed, to feeling, um, to having this physical reaction or this physical response. And when I say anything, it I'm going to what that actually means in a little, just in a little bit. Okay. So stress is triggered by an unspecified stimulus. There's not just one thing or one event or one occurrence that causes us to have the stress response. It is also caused by a change. So it can be an unspecified stimuli, or it can be a change that we experience. For example, going from extreme cold to extreme heat will trigger the stress response. Walking in here in Georgia, it can be 90 degrees, but walking into a building where it's 70 degrees can trigger the stress response. So it's triggered by an unspecified stimuli, nothing that's specific, and it can be triggered by a change. The other things that we want to understand about stress is that, or the stress response, is that sometimes we consider stress as being, bad because When we're stressed, we always say, "Oh my gosh, I'm stressed. I'm stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. I'm heading towards burnout. It's too much." So we think of stress as something that is bad. What we want to understand is that stress can be beneficial or it can be harmful. And there are three levels of stress that we often talk about. Stress consultants like myself talk about. One level of stress is eustress, and that's motivating stress. That's the type of stress that motivates us into action, and it enables us to meet the challenges that we face. We need eustress to get up in the morning. We need eustress to go to work. We need eustress to manage a car cutting us off as we're driving to work. So, eustress is beneficial and it's necessary. It's what gets us up in the morning. Then there's under stress. And under stress is basically when we're bored. Sometimes we have children, teenagers in particular, who are just sitting around. They're not doing very much. They're sitting on the sofa and they're saying they're bored. There's nothing to do. They don't know what to do. They don't want to do, right? So, under stress is when we are bored, when we don't have direction, when we don't have a clear path, when we are just vegetating. We're just sitting and we're just vegetating. So that's under stress. Then there is overstress. And overstress is basically when we're overwhelmed because we're going beyond our limits and we're working in overdrive. We can't seem to slow down. We can't seem to meet all of our responsibilities. So overwhelm is another level of stress that we can experience. So I've talked about eustress, which is positive. I've talked about under stress, which is not very good. It means that we are not utilizing our skills, our talents, and we certainly will not meet our potential when we are under stressed. And then there's overstressed, where we are going above and beyond and we're working in overdrive and we are approaching a level where we are burned out or we're at distress. So, we've talked about the fact that stress is a physical response, and it is a physical response to either an unspecified stimulus or to a change. Also, it can be beneficial or it can be harmful, meaning it can be motivating, it can be underwhelming. We can not have enough stress, which will cause us to have a lack of direction, lack motivation. We're just vegetating. We're bored. And then we can be overwhelmed because we are moving and in overdrive. Another thing to understand about stress is that perception matters. How you think about a stimulus or how you think about a change will also influence the stress response. It will influence how the body responds and um, how um, and to the extent that the stress response will you will experience the stress response. Basically, how you think will influence how long the stress response lasts. it will also influence the level of stress that you'll experience and that you'll feel. So, those are a few things that you want to understand about stress. And once you understand those things, you can act accordingly and have a clear idea of how you can manage your own stress so that it isn't overwhelming. So, once you understand stress and you have an understanding of the stress response, the second step to stressing less is to know your triggers. So let's talk about what some of those triggers could be. First, your mind. Yes, your mind is a trigger. How, and you might say, how so? Basically, your mind is where you carry your belief system, the things that the things that you believe about yourself, the things that you believe about the world around you. So, your core beliefs will influence your thoughts, what you think, as well as the expectations that you have of other people and expectations that you have of yourself. So, I want you to take a moment and just think about some of the beliefs that you might have currently that influence the thoughts that you have about yourself, as well as the thoughts that you have about other people. Now, as a therapist and a stress management consultant, I know that this is a difficult area for many of us to address. We often do not look at our belief system and, in particular, our core beliefs, because oftentimes our core beliefs are born out of our growing up experience or our experiences as we grew and matured. And so, as a result, or because of that, we have a lot of emotions attached to those beliefs. But it is important to look at those beliefs and to explore those beliefs, because what we believe deep down inside will always influence what we think. And what we think is going to influence what we expect of ourselves and what we expect of others. So, one of the areas that causes us stress is the mind. Another area that causes stress, the stress response to initiate, is our bodies. Again, this is something that we don't often think about. Anytime that we are ill, anytime that we exercise, anytime when we have a change in our diet, or anytime that we have life changes, such as puberty, or for women, anytime we go through menopause or we become premenopausal or postmenopausal, this adds to the stress that we experience. And again, remember, stress is a physical response to a change or to an unspecified stimuli. So, when we think about our bodies, think about times when you've been ill, like you've had flu, and you knew that you didn't feel well, right? You knew that you were achy and sore, you had a temperature, fever, you probably had some other um, ailments, but you had some type of physical experience when you had the flu. Well, as your body fights off the virus that causes flu, it also contributes to or triggers the stress response. So your body is not only fighting the flu, your body is also feeling stressed. Sometimes we don't know that because we're dealing with our illness. Hey, Allison, it's good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today in Ohio. Thank you for joining me. So we want to think about not only acute illnesses like the flu or a cold. Think about when your body is experiencing something like hypertension or diabetes. Your body is, it all contributes to the stress response. And stress also affects those conditions. People who are going through cancer treatment are um, also it's very important that their stress response is not triggered, because it can also have a negative effect on their their treatment. So we want to be aware of how we are treating our body, because when our body is not healthy, when we have conditions that put more stress and strain on the body, the stress response is constantly being triggered. And so it becomes a circle, a vicious circle, really. So we want to be aware of those changes that can contribute to stress because of the body, right? Illness, whether we're exercising, not exercising, our diet, etc. Another thing that can be stressful or contribute to the stress response are our relationships, whether it's a relationship with a partner, a spouse, family, friends, coworkers, supervisors, bosses, colleagues, uh, grocery store personnel. Our relationships can cause us to feel increased stress. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what contributes to that. I alluded to it earlier, our expectations, the expectations that we have of ourselves, the expectations that we have of others can contribute to the stresses that we feel, the experience of stress. So, again, we want to look at our beliefs that influence our thoughts, that in turn influence our expectations. Our job, and we know that our job contributes to the stress that we experience. And that could be because we're working long hours, we have deadlines that have been imposed, we don't feel secure in our job. Maybe our company is going through a transition, and so we don't feel secure in our job, in our position, or we're not feeling secure about the viability of the company. The other part of our job can be our boss, how our boss interacts with us. For some, it's how our boss interacts with other people relative to how they interact with us. Another area is just our colleagues. Working with our colleagues can be stressful, depending on the type of relationship that we might have with them. So, our job can be a big area for stress, a big place that causes stress. Now, when we talk about our job, I want you to just take a few moments and just think about how often do you bring your job home with you? How often do you bring your work home with you? If you're like me, I used to bring my job home with me. It's hard not to bring it home, isn't it? It's hard not to um, think about some of the work that you that you have and that you have to do the next day. So Allison said stress from new position at work, relationships, not setting boundaries, and caregiving for parents resulted in high blood pressure. Thankful for doctors who shared the long term negative effects of stress and high blood pressure. Wake up call to focus on me. How about that? Thanks for sharing that, Allison. You know, so many of us do not realize how much our um, our ongoing conditions and stress interact. We don't know. And I'm so glad that your doctors were able to talk to you in a way that you could hear that, because we carry a lot. I'm telling you, we carry so much on us, and we just don't realize how that interacts. And that's really part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to help people to understand, especially women of color, to understand that it is all intertwined. It all A lot of the things that we do, especially when it comes to our health, or that we don't do, can affect us down the road. And then when we carry so much stress, it can shorten our lives unless we make good, healthful changes. And so that's why this is really one of the reasons that I'm doing this. It's one of the reasons that I get on here every week talking about stress and how to alleviate or limit the overwhelming stress that we carry, because it will affect us in down the road, if not affect us right now. So thank you for sharing that. That's very important. It's important for other people to hear that as well. And I know that I'm about out of my time for today. So I'm going to go through these two um, bullet points, and then we'll have to pick it back up next week. So the next thing, we've talked about the mind, the body, relationships, and job. So let's talk about our environment. So our environment is really an interesting thing, because the way the because our environment has a great impact on how safe, secure, and stable we feel. And so, environment is very, very important. I work in a school system, and we work with children who are impoverished in some of our schools, children who are impoverished, uh, parents who are sometimes the families are homeless. They don't have a stable place to live. Think about the stress that those children are experiencing as they come to school. How can we expect those children to really attend to what's going on in school when they may not know where they're going to sleep that night, or their parent is looking for a job but hasn't found one, or they're staying in a motel because they don't have a stable place to live. It can be very stressful. The environment plays a big role in our stability and a big role in how safe we feel and how secure we feel. But there are other aspects of our environment that also influence the stress that we may experience. Noise is one of them. I'm fortunate to live in, I was just listening to the wind blowing through the trees just a few minutes ago. I'm fortunate to live in a place where there is, sometimes we hear cows uh, mooing at night. It's a rural area. And so there's not a lot of noise like traffic or trucks or a lot of loud, disturbing noises that would be frightening. But noise can cause our stress response to initiate. Pollution, whether that is air pollution, water pollution, um, pollution in our food, pollution is another part of the environment that can increase our stress levels. I've talked about traffic. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so I know how traffic is and can be in a larger city. I've also traveled. I've driven in New York and Washington, D.C. And when I've driven in D.C., my hands are like tight on the steering wheel because there's so much traffic. And if you've ever driven in Atlanta, Georgia, you know, y- your blood pressure is up, your stress level is up because Atlanta is like it's like you're on the Daytona 500 the way some people drive. But traffic can cause stress levels to increase. Weather, driving in snowy, icy conditions, driving in downpours, stormy conditions, or slick conditions can also contribute to increased um, increased stress levels. So the environment that we not only live in, the environment that we work in every day, do we feel safe in the buildings that we go in every day to work in? Do we feel comfortable going into the neighborhoods? I'm a social worker, I go into the neighborhoods. Do I feel do I feel comfortable going into a neighborhood, or does that increase my stress level? We have to consider the environment. Again, not just the environment that we're living in, but the environment that we traverse on a daily basis. And then finally, unexpected events. Unexpected events can be accidents, they can be um, disasters like the weather, like hurricanes or tornadoes, or it can be just other emergencies like breaking a foot. Yeah, which is it doesn't quite compare to a hurricane or a tornado, but breaking a foot can be an emergency. Um, Death in the family can be an emergency or an unexpected event that will trigger the stress response and will cause the stress levels to increase. So I know that we're not quite done. We've only gone through two. We've only gone through two steps. Two steps. We only have two steps done, but I am committed to going through the remaining three steps because these are five steps that we need to consider as we are lowering our stress levels so that we can stress less. We don't want to get rid of stress altogether because motivating stress, which is eustress, is important for us. It gets us up and it gets us out the door. What we don't want, We don't want overwhelming stress, stress that prevents us from doing the things that we need to do, as well as doing things that we want to do. Thank you, Allison. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad it was right on time. That's why I wanted to dive deep because, sometimes I'm talking to myself. I need it as much as I know other people do as well. So thank you. Thank you for that encouragement. I look forward to seeing you next week. We will be back next week, you all, on Stress Talk Live. Same time. Let other people know what we're doing. Let other people know. Direct them to our channel on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. That's where we show up at 4 o'clock every Sunday. That's all for now. I'm Marcelyn Bailey. As always, take good care.